Okay, my name is Joseph Douglas. I'm a professor of history here at Volunteer State, and I'm interested in American Indians and their history. And so I'd like to talk briefly about an American Indian from Tennessee named Sequoyah, who is one of the most famous of all Native Americans, not just from Tennessee, but in the whole country. The coastal redwood, the Sequoyah tree, largest tree in America, is named for him. So he must have been of some importance, right? So anyway, Sequoyah was born in the 1770s in a small Cherokee village or town in what's now Tennessee called Tuskegee, not to be confused with the same town in Alabama, but this is Tuskegee, Tennessee. It was on the Little Tennessee River, and it was near, well, it's in Monroe County, Tennessee today, in East Tennessee. And he lived there for the first 30 years or so of his life. He was his mother was a prominent Cherokee. His father, there's a lot of gaps in our knowledge. We don't know for sure who his father was. Probably he was a Euro-American, a fur trader perhaps, named Gist, G-I-S-T. At any rate, later Sequoyah was also known by the name George Gist, or sometimes Guess. Anyway, he could not become a warrior, and he wasn't good at agriculture because he was lame. There's a debate. It's not clear if he was born with problems with one of his legs, or if this was a hunting accident, or perhaps from a war party. But at any rate, he was lame. He had trouble getting around. One source says it was his knee, basically. So he couldn't do that. He raised livestock. He could only speak Cherokee. He couldn't read and write English or Cherokee because there was no written form of Cherokee. He became, well, even though he was not educated, he was a smart and an inventive person. He kept livestock, and he invented, for example, he had a dairy house, and he invented a machine for skimming the milk and that sort of thing. So anyway, he was a very inventive person. As more and more white Americans moved into the neighboring areas, he became more familiar with them, and he becomes familiar with writing. And he understands that the Europeans and some African Americans could write, and that they could send messages. He also became a skilled craftsman. He became a silversmith, and he would take silver coins that all the European Americans would carry around with them, and he would make items out of them, silver items, which were supposedly pretty good. Unfortunately, he didn't sign any of them, so we can't identify this was made by Sequoyah. He moves from Tennessee after about 30 years. He moves to Alabama, and he lived in a couple of places in Alabama. And in the War of 1812, he sided with the Americans, as many Native Americans in the South did. He fought under an American unit. Well, it was a Native American unit, but they're fighting under an American commander at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. So he's fighting alongside Andrew Jackson and the Tennessee militia, and alongside the so-called White Stick Creeks against the hostile Red Stick Creeks. And during the war, he also became aware of how important it was to have writing. I mean, the white soldiers could write letters home, they could get information, and he couldn't do any of that. So anyway, even before the war started, he had decided to create a writing system for the Cherokee. No Native Americans had any writing system, and he decided to do that. He started around 1809. It's going to take him more than a dozen years, about a dozen years. By 1821, he's finished it. He tries several different writing systems. The first one was like a pictographic system where there would be a symbol for each word, but of course that would be too many words, thousands of words. That's not going to work. He tried a different system where you had a simple sign for each idea. That also was impractical. And he ended up creating what we call a syllabary. So he created 86 symbols. Later he reduced it to 85. And each symbol represented a syllable. And so a syllable is a consonant and a vowel. And then he charted them out. So you could have the vowels on one side, the consonants on another. And he laid out these 85 symbols. Some of them look like English letters, some of them don't. Anyway, he then tested them with his fellow Cherokee. he was living in Alabama. Eventually, he moves out to Arkansas, becomes one of the early Cherokee settlers there. And he tested his ideas. He would have people say something, and then he would write it down, and then send it to his daughter, who he had taught to use the system. And she had never heard what the person said, so all she has is this writing, and she would be able to say exactly what they had said. And so the Cherokee were convinced this is a useful system. Many Cherokee began to learn it. In 1821, the system was tested. It's accepted. It becomes the official written form of Cherokee in 1824. The Cherokee newspaper appears in 1828, where it's English and Cherokee side by side. It's the first indigenous language. And it's really one of the only examples in history we have of an individual genius, a person who was not literate from a pre-literate or, I don't say illiterate, but a society that didn't have literacy. And yet, on his own, he creates a writing system. And it inspired many, many other people, Native Americans, people in other areas as well. And so it's a remarkable story. Although there are not a lot of written sources from Sequoyah's early life, there is oral history, we have some written sources, and we have the Cherokee traditional stories. All those put together. And then we do have some official documents. Later in his life, Sequoyah went to Washington, D.C. with two parties of Cherokee. He signed treaties with the U.S. government in the 1820s. We have witness accounts about when he died in the 1840s. Most interestingly, the Cherokee really became literate early on. He finishes the system in 1821. By 1830, 90% of the Cherokee can read and write, and that's a higher percentage than the white neighbors of the Cherokee. And they used it for their newspaper and ordinary record keeping, but they apparently also used it for things they wanted to keep secret. So in 2008 or 9, a cave in Alabama was found near Willstown, and that's where Fort Payne, Alabama today, and that's where Sequoyah lived for a while. And in a cave there's writing on the walls, and some of the writing is in syllabary. And so now there are actually 3 or 4 sites known where Cherokee went into caves and wrote in their secret language on the walls of the cave. And of course, there's a Cherokee scholar who lives in Cherokee, North Carolina, who went to the University of Tennessee, who has studied this, and there's a really good article about that if anybody wants to read it.